Hello, 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 my favorite people. Come on in, come on in. Be sure to tag someone and let them know that tonight is the what life strategy show with your show host Maxine Phillips McKoy. I cannot wait for you to meet my special guest, but you've already met him once. He was on last year, but he was so good we had to bring him back, which was what we do with a lot of our guests, right? But let's talk about level less. What is level less? Listen, did you know that 61% of Americans are ready to leave their job? That's right, their job. And why is that? Job dissatisfaction. And many times the job dissatisfaction comes because they're in a position that may not match their natural skills and abilities. So therefore, that's what we do here at Levelist. We help you to what discover those everyday abilities and strengths that you were born with. Then we help you to define what success looks like for you. Afterwards, we're going to help you to design a strategy so that you can reach those goals and reach those achievements, and then develop yourself so that you can deliver with excellence. And why is it that we do this? We do this because success without levels enables you to remove all of the stress from yourself and not have to compete with anyone, not even yourself. So, therefore, you continue to succeed on your terms, not what someone else dictates to you. So that's what Levelist does, and that's what we're all about. And you will be able to contact me at levelistco.com. You see at the bottom of the screen, you'll always be able to reach me there. But so much so far, what about me? But now let's talk about our guest. Our guest this evening, Frank. Frank Jordan is off the chain. And I say that because he was here last year and he is a Black history historian and has written over 7 books. So he's a bestseller author. I can't wait to hear what he's going to be talking to us about this evening. And one of the things he's going to be talking about is the development of our youth. That's right, the development of our youth. And that's one thing that Levelist does. We work with professionals in transition and our students. We're talking about college and high school level. So let's bring Frank Jordan up. Come on down, Frank. Come on in, as they say. Let's let technology do what technology does.
Hey, Maxine, how are
And
you?
then we'll be able to see Frank and we'll be able to have this phenomenal conversation. So don't forget to tag someone. Let us know where you're coming in, chiming from. And also put a question in the chat box so Frank and I can answer it during while we're having this conversation. So how are you this evening, sir?
Hey, I'm great now, Maxine. Now that I'm on this great show, how are you feeling?
I am feeling wonderful. Everybody always asks me, why are you so happy? And I listen, I choose to be happy. We have a choice in life, right?
Right.
And I always choose to be happy. Now, not everything is always peachy creamy, but there you can always look at things on a positive light. I cannot wait to hear all of this great information you are going to be sharing. And I call them platinum nuggets, Frank. You already know that, right?
Absolutely, Maxine. Absolutely. Hey, and congratulations on your award. I mean, that's something that's well deserved.
Well, thank you. I love helping individuals, and I know you do too because you're in the classroom, you're at universities, you're at colleges, you're talking about the historian information, the research that you're doing, and the books that you've written.
Right. Mhm.
So let's get started by you telling me, just telling not only me, I mean, I know a lot about you because I read about you, I keep up with you, but I
Thank
want
you.
you to share with our viewing audience. What is it and what caused you to start researching and becoming this Black history historian?
The lack of black education that was afforded to me during my childhood. And once you become an adult, when you're a kid, there are certain levels and links that are afforded to you, that you just can't get to, or you just have to just accept what's there for you. But when you become an adult, your mind, it broadens a little bit, it expands a little bit, You start to study a little bit more. You start to see a little bit more. You start to explore a little bit more. You start to
Mhm.
travel a little bit more, Maxine. And if you stay out of trouble, you start to actually meet some very interesting people of education. So I was just intrigued by what wasn't taught to us, Maxine. Not only as blacks, but it's just education, period, during the time when I was in school. And so that led it was almost like a domino effect, Maxine. Then I went to school for it, become a historian, studied lots of history, lots and lots and lots of history, traveled a lot. And it was almost like a domino effect. Just when you found out one thing, another door opened up, another door opened up. I started studying Roman history, I started studying ancient history, world history. Everything just pretty much connected and intertwined with what we have today here in America.
Wow, that is so interesting to hear you talk about. And because what I'm hearing you say is about all the exposure that you were given and all the opportunities and experiences that you had an opportunity to also become a part of. And not only did you read about it, but you also were able to interact with it as you were doing the research. That's awesome. Now, how often do our young people get a chance to do that? Especially if you talk about social economics, can be a hindrance. And I know tonight we're going to be talking about development of our youth. So what
Yes.
are you going to take us with that?
Hey, listen, education is very important. Spending time with your kids is very important.
Right.
And I think that's a developmental stage that a lot of parents have lost track of. I know according to my research, you have 81%, and this is a high percentage, according to my research, 81% of children between the age of 2 and 4 have actually played video games. So that's a very high percentage, Maxine. 81% of children between the age of 2 and 4
Two
have
and
played some kind of entertainment or video game. I know when I was 2 or 4, if I can remember back then, I know, Maxine, exactly. Our concentration wasn't on too much entertainment. Our concentration was on solely doing what our parents told us to do. And
correct.
it was more geared toward and concentrated toward going to bed at a certain time and getting up, going to school.
And not only that, Frank, they would always say, go outside and play.
Right.
We didn't have the luxury of sitting around, and even sometimes, even though we had a TV, but you only had a couple channels when I was at 2 and 4.
Right.
But so nowadays, we start talking about the kids and video games between the age of 2 and 4. Well, we got to still get them that outside, the experience, that nature, getting back to nature, because one of the things we talk about is always your natural abilities, the things that you do every single day. And this is where the parents can start observing what that child is really gifted at doing, even at that age between 2 and 4.
You're right. You're right. 65% parents, 68 last time I checked, of parents don't spend enough time. You know why, Maxine? A lot of parents tell their kids to stay inside and they marginalize them to a video game is because parents don't have to do much. When you're outside, you have to interact with your kids, you have to monitor them, you have
Right.
to watch them, and Lord forbid, you may have to talk to them from time to time and tell them the difference between a tree and green grass and that animal over there and that particular structure over there. So if you can marginalize your kid to tell them to go in a room, don't come out, and you can turn on a video game, that makes it more easier for the parents to, not to do what they're supposed to do. 68% of parents don't put in the effort of the time to actually sit and talk and nurture their kids anymore.
Wow, that's still a high percentage.
Oh,
68 is still high, very high. We,
absolutely.
you know, and it makes me think about, even our young adults who are in high school. And I know when I did my research with the we call it counselors, the career counselors,
Right.
there were like one career counselor had to manage between 350 to 400 students. That's entirely too much. There's no way they're going to get that individualized attention. So if they're not getting it at home, then they don't get it at school. Then where are they going to get it? Hello?
Right. That's right. That's right. From people like yourself, Maxine, from great people like yourself. You have to care more. You have to, first of all, you got to care,
Care.
about, what you do, and you have to love, what you represent. So if you're a counselor, 300 kids, what was it? You said 300. That's far too much. That's 300 different personalities, coming at you, on different, on maybe 8 or 9 different occasions, in a day, with different problems, with different grade aspects, with
Right.
different goals. So that's just a little bit too much. I think that the lack of, education, plays a big role in it. And I think also, you have, so many single parents, and, so many single parents out here that just don't have the time, because teachers can't teach you everything.
Right.
It's up to the parent to pretty much fill the gaps where the teachers, didn't do with the 6 hours of the day that the children are in school. So if you have a parent, that's working all day, they may be working 2 jobs a day, Maxine, how much time do they really have, to really, spend time or concentrate, with their kids' schooling? Not much, not much.
I know when I was growing up, I went to predominantly, Caucasian students in the school.
Mhm.
And so my parents only my mother went to the 11th grade and my father went to the 3rd grade. So it was not a whole lot of exposure that they could give me. And so if you don't get it in school, then where are you going to get it? Now,
Right.
I'm not saying that all kids have a home that they're going to and it's like that, but we don't know what's going on behind the closed doors. We don't know how involved the parents are with their child's education. I know, but as I grew older and I became an adult, I was at the school all the time with my children. They probably tired of mama coming up to the school volunteering. But I told him, I said, but I want my presence known, So
Right.
it's not like you're trying to correct what happened, but when you want them to understand, you support what they're doing. Education was near and dear, and still near and dear to me, and that's one of the reasons why I work with the youth the way I work with them. But Frank, you did so much research,
Mhm.
and we're going to be talking about what took place yesteryear, in a sense, and
Right.
what's going on today when it comes to education. So do a little comparison for me right there with your research versus what you have found what back then versus what's going on right now.
Oh, absolutely. Let's just take the 1960s. The single parent rate, let's just say 1960 was at, I think, maybe 12%. Compared to today, I think it's 29%. The single is up. Also, the dropout rate was only at, I think 8%, back in the 1960s.
Mhm.
So, that plays a big major role in it as well too. When you are blessed also, and not discounting, a lot of single parents, because you have a lot of great single parents out here who do phenomenal, I mean phenomenal jobs out here, more so than, 2-parent homes, so to speak, at times. But the dropout rate was a lot less, back then. And I think it has a lot to do with, historically speaking, because it wasn't too much distraction, out here, Maxine, for the kids really to get themselves right into. Let's just say, for instance, I researched, you got 10% of kids that actually use software for education. 10% of kids that use software for education, but you
Right.
have 81% kids that use software for video games. So the tide is kind of changing a little bit, Maxine. When we were going to school, we were just centered, more focused on education, getting out of school, getting good grades. Now it's just so much out here now, social media that's available to kids now. Their attention span goes about 10 different ways when you hit on a computer, instead of just focus and marginalizing and concentrating on just what you're supposed to do in school.
One of the things that came to mind when you were talking about the video games and the kids playing on the computers and so forth, what comes to mind is one of the assessments that I do, the ability assessment, and it helps them to hone in on their learning style.
Right.
That learning style is so significant
Right.
because there is a child who needs to do those video games because that's their learning style. That's their interactive. They need to
Right.
move. That's their rhythm learner. So they need to be able to
Right.
do. But the other thing that I help parents to understand when that child must do on the computer, something like that, watch how they do strategies because video games, there's a strategy associated with it. So many times we look at video games as though it's just a game, but
Right,
if it's the right type of game, then
right,
it has a strategy attached to it. So that child is learning strategies, learning how to maneuver, is learning how to do critical thinking, is learning how to make decisions and solve problems. But it again, it depends on the type of video game that they're working with. And
right.
even some of the sports video games still has a strategy, right? You still have to have a
Right.
strategy even with those.
Yeah, it can teach them how to count. It can teach them, it can teach them a great deal about math as well too.
Yeah,
When you talk about sports, and like you said, all video games aren't just deemed as a negative aspect of
right.
learning. You do have some really learning strategies of video games out here as well too. To the credit, of the good educational system.
Right, right. Because I know when my grandson was coming up, I had him on games, but they were exactly what you said. They had did math, they did science, they did language arts. So it had a
Right,
a purpose behind it. So
right,
he was
right.
able to learn right that way, even though I just didn't put him there and leave him there, but I would come back and ask him questions. So tell me what you learned and explain to me what you know, because it locked in on what he learned as he could explain it. Because I'm a firm believer, as an educator myself from the corporate world, I believe learning hasn't taken place until they can apply it.
Right, right. And let me say this also, Maxine. The dropout rate in rural cities are much higher than they are in the
Good.
suburbs.
Yeah.
Meaning, as far as like southern states compared to northern states.
Right.
Again, distractions. When you grow up in a predominantly overpopulated area. Where you have a neighborhood that's enlarged by maybe housing projects, or you just have a large populated area, there goes again the distractions. Where you have, when you may take a trip down to 95 into southern states or rural areas or suburban areas, those neighborhoods are less pretty much populated. So it's not too many distractions, that kids can get a hold of to,
Right.
especially when we was growing up, Maxine. I grew up in Brooklyn, very heavy populated area. It was very hard for me to concentrate. I know from the time I get up in the morning and from the time I come back from school, because it's just so much going on, Maxine. Your concentration's over here, it's over here. Someone is arguing over there. You have someone over here. Your neighbor is over here. Someone's playing music over there. And it's hard as a student. And if you don't have the right foundation of parents and role models around you, which are very important,
Right.
role models that are around you showing you to stay on the straight and narrow, you can easily fall into a pit that you don't want to.
Oh man, you said a mouthful there. Listen, did you all get a lot of those platinum nuggets that were just dropped? And what I gathered from it, yeah, back then, back in the 60s versus where we're going right now. Yes, you did have the area was not as populated or concentrated,
Right,
but you also had sometimes isolation. So you
right.
even have to be careful about the isolation piece as well.
Mhm.
But parents, but the viewing audience, period, just not just parents, because you could be a grandparent, you could be a supporter, you could be a mentor, you could be a role model, but it is all applicable because what we have to do is concentrate on how can we help our young adults? How can we help our adults who find themselves in that same situation? So just because we are a certain age does not mean that we do not find or go through some of those same challenges. So what I want you to talk about now is you talk about some of the statistics. Talk to me a little bit about our teenagers between that 14 and 19-year old. Give me some stats on that and what has your findings been?
Yeah, young adulthood is pretty much the same as far as the dropout rate. You have a dropout rate now of between the age, I know between the age of 16 and 18, the dropout rate now is 39%. Compared to the 60s, it was just 10%. So again, these are young adults being influenced, especially now, Maxine, especially now. You have to really look at what's around them. Even when you go to different states and when you go to different cities, you got to look at certain programs, that the government is not funding. The government is putting a certain percentage of money, else places that have nothing to do with education. And what it all boils down to, Maxine, is education. Mental health
Yeah,
programs,
yeah,
to keep the kids
yes.
off the street, to keep their mind geared toward education and doing the right thing. So you have young adults that are, and you have to make, sometimes, Maxine, you have to make things a little bit interesting for them, and you have to make things a little bit exciting for them
That's
to
right.
get their attention.
That's right. You have to meet them where they are.
Right.
And then take them where you know that that's going to be helpful for them, and as well as where they want to go. Because one of the things that we concentrate here on is, so tell us where you see yourself. What is it that you see yourself doing or want to do? And that way we know how to go about helping them, not only to assess their innate abilities, their natural abilities, but also you have to help them to design a strategy. So even back then, I know when I was in high school, I didn't always get that attention. No one took me under their wing and designed a strategy for me to help me to understand, what are you going to do beyond high school?
Right.
I was like a sink or swim, and I'm like, okay, I'm paddling right now. It took me a few years, but one thing I knew is at the age of 17, although I was going to this predominantly, a mix of a majority of white kids,
Right.
my GPA, they looked at it in a negative format. And they looked at it because I was a 2.4.
Mm-hmm.
Well, 2.4 is a low C, right? It's a low
Right.
C.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't mean that I just couldn't academically recall maybe what was in the books because of my learning style.
Mm-hmm.
But I tell everybody, but I was an A student when it came to my everyday natural abilities that I was given with, that I received when I was born.
Right.
So that's what I used in order to propel me and move forward in life. And so that's one of the things we have to hone in with our youth, is to help them to understand, what are you naturally gifted at doing? What are
Right.
those strengths that you have? And
Right.
then let's move them in that direction, opposed to moving them in the direction that we want them to go. And then they're
Right.
rebellion, right? They're going to go to school, but they're not going to make any grades.
Right.
It's
Right.
just money down the tube in their time as well. So what do you say to that?
Yeah, you know what? I couldn't agree with you more. Hey, listen, you nailed it. And one of the things I find is this, is that when I actually go and visit schools, or I go and lecture, at colleges, or I do a book signing, one of the things I do know is this, Maxine, and this is no, nothing, grueling enough, one thing I do know is this, is that when you are working with a certain demographic of kids, when
Right.
it comes down to a race denomination, um, kids, they can relate more to a scientist, being more, that looks like them.
It's like,
Then it starts to be a little bit more cool when you find out that, the GPS system was invented by a black woman by the name of Gladys Mae West.
right.
The light bulb, and great inventions. So when they're looking at things that they can relate to, and people they can relate to, now they're a little bit more interested, Maxine, because now they feel that if they can achieve that, my people can achieve that,
Yes.
so can I. You mean to tell me that a black man invented the light bulb, and Tommy, so now your horns is going up a little bit. Now you're
Yes.
relating a little
Yes.
bit. And Maxine, that does help a tremendous amount.
Tremendously, tremendously. I never will forget that I was over my daughter's elementary school. I was the lead on the cultural awareness,
Mhm.
and we did Africa and African Americans for an entire month. And we brought in all of the products that the African Americans had created or even made better. And it was in a library where they could actually go in and physically touch them. The stoplight, like you said, the pressing comb,
Right,
And the thing about it is that the individuals in the community had all of these items,
right, right,
and so I was able to gather
right.
all of them because everybody as the community became involved in it. It was just absolutely wonderful how much education those children actually received in that month about Africa and African Americans.
Right, right.
So
Hey,
you
Maxine, and let me say this too. Why do you think so many young black men enjoy the sport of basketball? It's because we see our people playing basketball at its greatness. So you
Great.
can just imagine just the more if they were shown how many black scientists there are down in NASA, how many great, counselors named Maxine Pearl Phillips,
Come on.
is here to help them. So they want to aspire that greatness just as they see it. So when
Yeah.
they see someone like LeBron James or Michael Jordan on TV, they're attracted to that. Oh my goodness, this guy's brilliant. He can play basketball. But it's so much more out there that we have achieved and
That's
we have discovered and invented other than playing basketball that they just won't show you, that they just won't, they just sometimes they hide it from you, but when you do see that, like when I was at the last high school I was at, Maxine, to keep 200, to keep 2,500 kids attention, that wasn't an easy thing to do. That
no,
wasn't
not at all.
an easy thing to do. But when I showed them the great inventions, that we were part of and the great inventions, that kind of piqued their curiosity, like, wait a minute, you mean to tell me, someone by the name of Shirley Smith invented the call waiting system? Wait a minute, she looked like
Us?
Maxine?
Yes.
There you go. There you go.
And it helps our hair, so one of
Absolutely.
those.
Absolutely. And that helps a tremendous amount, a tremendous amount.
I'm always a firm believer that we have to allow it doesn't matter if the youth, it matter if it's an adult who have not had exposure.
Right.
I come from a family of 12. I'm the eighth of 12. So with that many children, we didn't take vacations, and
Right.
because of that, I would always try to figure out what am I going to write about when I go back to school, because they always want you to write about what you did during the summer.
Do they still do that? Do they still do that?
I don't know if they still do, but that's what they did when I was coming up. But
Right.
what I made sure was my children, we didn't always take a vacation, but I always had an experience for them.
Right.
The library, the museum, or go and work at a shelter, or do the March of Dimes, or do some kind of diabetes walk. Sometimes you give back that way, but I
Right.
made sure that they had an experience that they could go back and they could write about and they could tell about how it influenced them and
Right.
what impact did they make on the community.
Very good. Hey, Maxine, that's that. You know what? That is excellent. That is excellent. One of the things I know, and one of the strategic things I know across my research, kids have to be. They're more prone to what they can see and what they can touch and what they can feel. So
Yeah.
if there you go. So if you want to take the time to take kids, to a physical museum, take them to Washington D.C. to the African American Museum and let them feel, touch, and see the greatness of what they can become part of. And like you said, set up a strategy with the kids. Do you feel that you can be a great singer like Aretha Franklin? Do you feel you can be a great guitarist like Jimi Hendrix? Do
Right.
you want to be a terrific scientist, a neurologist scientist, down in NASA? So one of the craziest things is this, Maxine. You're gonna laugh. Oh my goodness, you're gonna laugh. I just had
What's
this
that? What's
conversation.
that? What's
Look,
that?
I just had this conversation with someone just the other day on the phone. One of my really good friends when we was going to school together. I'll make this real short. This guy would make me look like a special needs kid. This is how smart this guy was, and he would get teased all the time about how smart he was. The clothes that he wore, to the point where this guy had to dumb himself down just to
Oh,
try to fit
wow.
in, right? Just to try to fit. And this is someone I grew up with, just to try to fit in with the kids that weren't doing anything, that was a lesser influence and that was a bad element to be around. So
Definitely.
this is what goes on, Maxine, in the short. This is what goes on throughout communities.
And
This,
today it's still happening. It's still happening today. Not just back then, but it still is a part of it today. Because even
wow,
with the
really?
assessment that I do, I had one young lady who was being bullied in school, but once I completed her assessment and she understood that she has this intuition and
Right,
she cannot turn it off. So yes, you do read people, you can read them just like that. And so when you read them and you see that they're on a negative, then walk away.
right.
Just walk away because you don't want it to damage your brand. And I tell
Yeah,
everybody, you are your brand and your brand is you. So
Right.
whatever you do, say, think, or behave is going to reflect on you as an individual. And that's where your character and your integrity can be damaged.
Right. Right. Maxine, I have a question for you. I have a question for you. This particular young man, well, he's a grown adult right now. You know, uh, he kind of succumbed to the submission of being teased, and
Okay.
to the point where he went left because the negative was generating so much attention that he never got, as being teased and as being called a nerd, and
Right.
kids in the
Right.
neighborhood. So as an adult now, he actually does, and he's doing the same negative that he was doing from when he was a kid. Good kid going bad. So let me ask you a question, Maxine, and I'll land me back off of what you got to say. For a kid for a kid that's being teased because of their academic genius and their academic smarts, um what advice would you give them to go around that, and what would you put in place for that kid to continue, without being academically bullied like that? Because it goes on.
Right. Right. And many times you can end up having a peer, a peer group,
Right.
and then that way, if you bring some of these individuals who are always, telling you you're too smart, you this, you that, whatever,
Right.
say, well, let's get together and let's study together, and then that way you're sharing some of your knowledge with them, and then they can share some knowledge with you, and they'll see that they have knowledge as well. They might not be applying it, and they might even not know how to apply it.
Right.
So that's where the learning styles come in as well, because a child could have a gift and an ability, but if they don't know their learning style, because in a learning style, there's a couple things that happen. When you take in new information, you have to understand how to process it.
Right.
So then you can then use the information. I
Right.
always say, we always talk about get wisdom, but you get the wisdom, but without understanding how to use the wisdom, it's just like not having it at all.
Right.
And so it's the
Absolutely.
same thing with learning. I mean, I'm the type of learner, I tell everybody in a minute, I'm a visual learner and I'm a kinesthetic learner. So
Right.
when I like to see it, and I'm a colorful person, I want to see you do it, and then I'll do it after you, and then I got it.
Right.
Now, some people have to read. You
Right.
can't just tell it to them. You have to let them read it, then take them through the step by step by step. So it depends on the way that person learned. And so he can take his way of learning and help others or share with others in a group, a study group. And then when it comes to being in the classroom, he doesn't always have to raise his hands first.
Right.
He can allow
Right.
others to raise their hand, and if no one knows the answer, then he can raise his hand and say, "Well, I think I when I read, this was my understanding." And
Right.
in that way, it's not like he's a Mr. Know It All. And believe it or not, that still happens today, even with adults,
Wow.
because some adults can take unrelated information, they can see the big picture out of it just like that, and other people around the table watch looking at them like, well, they think they know it all. How in the world she come up with that fast? Well, what they fail to realize is that it's natural. It's something
Right.
that they do every day, and
Right.
they can't turn it off because that's how they were born. This is how they
Right.
they call it hardwired, right?
Right.
And so that's what he could do. But no, you don't dumb it down. You
Right.
don't not use your academic talents. And the other thing is they have to learn to believe in themselves.
Right.
And that's where
Right.
confidence comes in at. And
Right.
so once they understand that this is what you were born with, you can't turn it off just because someone else does not like it.
Right.
Embrace it and then help others maybe understand how you use, like what I just said to you. I'm a visual learner and I'm a kinesthetic.
Right.
Told you up front. That's how I learn.
Right, right. You look what you just said. You're 100% correct. And what that brings about, believe it or not, that brings about as smart as some kids can be, and as smart as some adults can be. That brings about a low self-esteem about yourself. Like, man, maybe I don't. And growing up as a kid, you get teased so much by the less kids that are academic, smarter than you, and so sooner or later, the kids are going to tease you. They're going to tease
Yeah.
you more. Then they're going to physically put their hands on you. So, if you're not the kind of person that's confrontational growing up,
You
you're not
can't
a
be.
fighter. So
Yep.
what do? You dumb yourself down. You change your path of going to your house. And a lot of kids, unfortunately, they drop out of school because they don't want to go to school and be teased. And you nailed it. I think parents play a big role in that. You got to keep pushing your kids and letting them know, like you said, that's a gift that you have. Don't never, minimize, and don't never downplay, your genius and your smarts for anyone. And parents have to stay on their kids, because if you don't stay on your kids, and let them know that it's nothing wrong with them, it's something, if you don't stay on your kids, that could put them into a depressive stage where
Yes. And
many things can happen.
yeah, and we always talk about mental health, right?
Right.
We always talk about mental health. And this is a way of improving the mental health of a child, is to
Right.
be supportive of the child. And supportive does not mean that you have all the answers, because I didn't have all the answers for my children. But what I did have, I had an ear.
Right.
I listened.
Right.
I wanted to hear what they had to say.
Right.
And they didn't always agree with me, and I didn't always agree with them. But there was one rule in my house: no matter what, you must be respectful.
Right, right, absolutely, Maxine. And look, let me tell you something. Growing up, this is kind of veering off a little bit. Growing up, for some strange reason, in the Black community, being smart isn't supported among your peers.
Right.
Being academically, great isn't. It's just not cool,
I, I
amongst us, for some strange reason, because everything starts at home, Maxine. Everything starts at home. The old saying, you see a kid that's, you knock on the door, you're going to see the same thing. So, so you're going to see the same thing. But everything starts at home. Parents must be more supportive of their kids. Don't tease your kid. Don't call your kids out of their name.
Come on
Um,
now. Yep.
Right. If your kids are suffering with some kind of weight imbalance, and they don't give them the same thing that they're running from at school.
Right.
Home's supposed to be that safe haven. Hey, dad. Hey, mom. Hey, mom. Hey, dad. Hey, I'm home. What you got for me? And if
Right.
they're receiving the same exact thing, even worse, from their support system, ooh, that can turn really
And
bad, Maxine.
And not only that, you might not be able to sit down and have a full course meal, right? Dinner. But I bet you, if you're having a sandwich and a drink, then still sit down and have a conversation. How was your day? Tell me about what happened today. Well, how did you react to it? How did you respond? Well, what did you think about it?
Right.
Because what you're doing is you're teaching them how to make decisions. You're teaching them how to walk away. You're not saying take a slap, 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 slap. That's not what you're saying. But what you're saying is that you have the decision. You have the ability to make the decision. But what you do not control are the consequences behind
Right.
your decision.
Right.
And when a child understands that at the earliest age possible, then our hope is that they would be making the better decisions so that it would not become a negative impact on their life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And parents have to understand they have to be their kids' biggest role models. They
Yes.
have to be their kids' biggest role models. If parents aren't their kids' biggest role models, um, they're going to be guided somewhere else,
Someone will be.
where
Yeah.
they feel loved and respected. So if it's in a negative aspect, that guides them to gang activity where
Yeah.
they feel loved and respected.
And
Or if it's
that belonging plays a huge role in a child's life.
right,
And one of the things the reason why I started middle school, high school is because they're at that fork. They're at that fork of the road. They can be
right,
easily persuaded,
right,
as they're going from middle school into high school. But if they understand that they already have these everyday abilities that they're using, and here's the strategy. So you tell me where you want to go.
right.
So I have
Yeah.
plenty of them tell me they want to be in the NFL and the NBA, right? NBA. I'm like, okay, well, there's nothing wrong with it. Let's
Right,
strategize for you to be there. But I
right,
also want you
right,
to do a plan B.
right,
In the
right,
event that we don't make it there, not saying
right,
that you're not going to, but in the event if something should prevent it, then what's our game plan? What's our next game plan?
right.
And if you always have that game plan ready and that strategy ready, then that's why I say levelless is about success without levels.
That's right. That's
You can
right.
be success without climbing those levels.
That's
Long
right.
as you can define success and you continue to move forward and you believe in yourself and you're meeting those goals, you are successful.
That's right. That's right. Hey, listen, you nailed it. And kids have to be rewarded as well too. That's another level too. Kids have to be rewarded for their good. I know when I was growing up in Brooklyn, there was a place in my neighborhood called the Navy. It was called the Navy Yard Boys Club.
Okay.
Now it's the Boys and Girls Club of America now.
Yeah.
But that place, I'm telling you, that place was in my neighborhood in Brooklyn, right in Farragut Projects, and Brooklyn is still there to this day. That place actually diverted the energy, the negative energy, and a lot of young men into doing a lot of things within that neighborhood that could have been, but it
Right.
diverted us because that was a place, it was a community center. We learned how to play pool. That was something I never had did in my life, play pool. They had
Right.
they had a library, that housed black books.
Mhm.
They took us on trips. So, within the community, when you get out of school, to have that energy go somewhere else, and you had counselors that was there, Maxine, that was asking us, what do you want to do in life? What do you want to become? What do you want to do at the age of 8 and 9? That's a hard question to ask.
I don't know what's out there, exactly. But Denzel Washington is a prime example. He went to the Boys and Girls Club, and look at what he has done in his life. And
Right.
he also used to follow his mother to her barber. I think she was a hairdresser, and he
Hmm.
would go there and he would watch and observe them. But at a hairdresser, what do? They tell stories.
Right.
They constantly
Right.
telling stories and interacting, and you got all these moving, all these expressions, and that's where he said he picked up a lot of his acting from
Wow.
observation, because he's probably a high observation person. So
Right.
that remember what I'm talking about, the learning style. So you got to understand, how do you learn? He could learn through hearing and what? Observing.
Right, right, right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And diversity and being around different cultures and
Right.
being around different aspects of learning, it kind of broadens your scope a lot, and it kind of opens your mind,
It does.
a great deal, other than just being marginalized to when you come home, you're to the bedroom and that's it. It's time, sitting down, with your kids, eating dinner with them, like you just mentioned, even if it's just a snack, you're sitting down and you're asking them and you're monitoring them, you're seeing what
Yeah.
they're doing. Do they have any strange habits? Do they got any tattoos? Do they,
Did you weren't aware of?
right, right, right. Are they having any kind of cuttings on, cuttings in their flesh? Anything,
Yeah.
that you can marginalize and you can monitor your kids. That's very important. That's very, very important, because if you ignore your kids today, today is something small, and tomorrow could be a lot greater. Problem could be a lot greater.
And the other thing is, there's so many different organizations out here too. I know I'm a the career coach, and they can come to me for the coaching and the consulting and the learning styles and test taking, note taking, and all of that. But there are other organizations out here like the National Black MBA.
Okay.
They are there to also help advance. You got the 100 Black Men. You got some of these
Right.
other for the female, the
That's
women
right.
groups. So you got some parents. There's so many different opportunities out here that we can
Mhm.
allow our children to have the exposure. And not only children. Now I work with professionals in transition as well. So you're a career person and you're in transition, and you're not sure what you want to be when you grow up.
Right.
Don't let no shame in your game happen.
That's right.
We need to be able to identify it and discover what your natural abilities are, and put a strategy in place so that you can become that person that you want to become. You can get the salary that you want. You can
That's
live
right.
the lifestyle that you
That's
deserve.
right.
There's never too late. It's
That's
never
right.
too, but you have to be willing to ask for help.
That's right. That's right. And Maxine, let me say this too. Again, going back to what we said earlier, role models play a very important part.
Very
Role
important.
models are very, very, very important. Watch your kids, who they befriend. Watch your kids, monitor their telephone time, watch who their friends are. I want to know my kids, I want to know their friends' parents. I want to know who their parents are. If you got a best friend in school and you want to bring him to the house, I want to meet their parents. I want to know what their parents do. I want to know what their parents do, because if you're going over their house and you're spending 2, 3 hours and you're going to spend a great deal of time out of this household, and
Right.
you're going over your friend's house, I want to meet their parents, and I want to know what their parents do. And I'm
Right.
gonna tell you why, Max. I know you want to say something, but I'm gonna tell you why
No, no, no,
I
no. I'm
just said
listening.
that.
I'm loving it. I'm loving it.
And the reason why I said that, Maxine, is because growing up right in Brooklyn, my dad was very strict. I grew up in a two-parent household. My dad was really strict. My mom, she was just as strict as he was. And I had two older sisters. So there was this certain particular gentleman that was, one of my best friends. And his parents really didn't really have like too much of a leash on this guy. So
Okay.
that was Maxine, that was great for me. Like, oh my goodness, go down his house and I could
Wide open.
stay all night and look at things on TV. My parents wouldn't allow me to watch it. But that was Maxine, that was great. That was great.
I
So,
know. I know.
the crazy part, Maxine, is that I like going to his house doing the things I couldn't do, but he like coming to my house and seeing that structure that we had. I was like, are
Wow.
you crazy? Are you this is like being locked up, man?
But see, what you didn't realize, and then because I would not realize it at that age either. But as an adult and doing this assessment, this young person wanted structure.
Right,
You wanted autonomy. You like a variety of things.
right,
But this person wanted structure and he
right,
didn't have it. And he
right,
was trying to figure out how am I going to get it. So he felt like he come to your house and he gets the quiet time, he gets some structure in place, and then you go over
right,
there and you're like, man, I'm wide open now. What can we do now? But I love what you said as far as you want to know the parents. I
right.
knew every single one of my children's
See,
friends' parents.
see,
I made sure that I went to visit with them. I asked
right.
questions. I want to know where they work at. I asked everything but their social security number.
I believe you. I believe you.
But it's one of those deals. It's like, listen, I got to know, right, who are they hanging out
Yeah,
with?
right,
And
right. Do that,
another platinum nugget, parents. This is something that you must do. And
right,
a lot of times your kids don't even want you to meet their friends. And I
right,
tell my daughter, no, 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 no. If
right.
you're gonna go over there, I must meet the parents and I'll take you over there and I'll meet the parents so I can see the environment that you're gonna be in.
That's right. Because you don't want what you built up to be destroyed in less than a year or two, and you don't want those negative influences, to
Right,
come upon your kids. So that's something else also, Maxine. Parents, they have to monitor their kids and
right.
they have to really, like you said, get to know your kids' friends' parents.
Yeah.
Really.
Right. And another nugget is get to know the teachers. Get to know your kids' teachers so that you
Right,
can know. I mean, even if parents, if you're even going to school, get to know the professor.
right,
so
right,
they'll know you. I mean, so this is it is not only just in high school or collegiate, but it happens in life because you have to learn to build relationships.
right.
And those relationships can carry you. I mean, I have a relationship that I know this lady, a friend, I think over 45 years. My son is 45, so 45 years now. We've been just
Wow.
so close, so
Wow.
yeah, so it's about if young people who are taught the importance of loving themselves and believing in who they are is a great start to the foundation of building a better human being. That's my friend Elizabeth McNeil. She's a supporter. She always comes on and she's observing. We had Edith Matthews on saying thanks for sharing. We had Diggs BTW. Hey, what's up? He says, or they say, so not sure who that is, but thank you all for joining us. If you have any questions, please put the questions in the chat so that we're here to answer any questions that you have. We're just having a phenomenal conversation, as you can see, about this Black history historian sitting in front of us.
Listen, and what do you look? And one thing I know, I know through studying, and I know through a lot of counseling and developing, because I do have a school located in Raleigh where use parents counsel. Um, I, I I do notice this is that again, if the parents aren't there, and like she just said, as far as the foundation, kids are more prone again to mimic everything that they see.
Yeah.
So, from the foundation of everything. So, what do you do? Like 9 times out of 10, Maxine, we always receive certain elements, whereas that, is ex members of gangs, maybe a little abuse, women here and there.
Mhm.
But what's popular now is a lot of gang violence, Maxine. That's
Okay.
very popular amongst the youth. Um, and like you said, to feel belong, to feel belong. Here it is, you have 6 and 7 guys, that's standing on the corner, they're uniformed in a certain color, an
Right.
area of color. Um, either I join or they're gonna force me to join. So what would be your advice, Maxine, to a youth, that's facing that kind of balance of decision?
You're going to have to talk to the parents first of all. You're going to have to open up and talk to your parents. If there's a counselor at school, you're going to have to talk to that counselor at school. You have to make it be known, what's going on and what your observation is. As Elizabeth said, it's like a code of honor to be in a gang, even though you're going to jail, but you got to understand, to what degree are you going to commit? We often talk about, we got away from slavery, right?
Right.
But if we're not careful, we're putting ourselves back into a different form of
Oh, yeah.
slavery.
Oh yeah. Oh
So
yeah.
we have to help them to understand that as well. And it can happen to anybody at any time and at any place. Just as a constant, you said something earlier about that walk to school, that constant pathway walk to school, and they
Mhm.
see you constantly walking, and all it takes is that one time that they see something that you have on that they want. You
Right.
just never know how it's going to happen. So parents, you have to be aware of that, because many times we want to put our kids on the bus, which is nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But if they got to walk a far distance to get to the bus, then it's something we might need to want to rethink.
Right. Right. Right.
How can we handle that? What can we do differently? Because sometimes kids are placed in positions that they don't want to be in, but they're just faced with it. They walk into it and it's there because it's a day in and day out thing, and they go to school 5 days a week.
Right.
And there's a
Right.
pattern that's being noticed.
Right. Right.
So
And yeah, no, no, no. You're absolutely correct in what you said, and what a lot of people have to understand also is that ignorance is glorified in the society.
mhm,
From the way that you have the use, the way they made wear their clothes at a certain attire, versus you have to always show your kids what's the flip side and the opposite of what they admire. Let's
yeah,
just say, for instance, they admire certain gang violence and certain gang activity. You have to show them the outcome, okay, of she said she was raised in Brooklyn, and also, wow, really?
yeah, it was a cop. So she said you can add it too strict,
Wow.
not as hers. So yeah.
Hey, look, let me tell you, look, that's hey, look, let me tell you something. That's a coincidence. That's a sure coincidence, because I used to work for the New York City Police Department for 12 years in Brooklyn. That's a coincidence right there.
You
And
might know her dad. Yeah.
right. And you have to always show the kids the flip side to the outcome of what will happen if you continue to glorify this, Maxine.
Yeah.
It's all fun and games now because kids are drawn to fun. Kids are drawn to, things are glorified. I grew up in a neighborhood where you had guys that went to juvenile correction as kids, and that was something that was glorified in my neighborhood. Oh my goodness, this guy, he did, 3 months in Spofford. Elizabeth know what I'm talking about. Spofford Juvenile Home in the Bronx.
Okay.
And that was something that was glorified when I was growing up. And luckily for my dad, he was one of those law guys too.
Right.
So he showed me the flip side of what would happen if you did the same thing is Mr. Gonzalez,
Right.
he's glorifying it. This is what's going to happen if he keeps doing this. So you have to give them that balance, Maxine. You just can't leave things open-ended for your kids. You got to say, hey, that's fun for now, but here's the result right here if you keep doing this. And it's not going to be
Exactly.
good.
And I think about you. We talked about experience. We talk about awareness, and I think that's where sometimes the legal side, the criminal side, and things like that can be shown at an earlier age as well.
Right.
Not wait until it happened, and then we want to show them all this.
Right.
Then it's too much for them to comprehend. Whereas
Right.
it is uh, gradually given to them and shown to them and given that experience. I never will forget when I had an opportunity to go into the judge's chamber, and see what that looked like.
Right.
That was scared enough. I mean, that was enough. Being in the courtroom and in the judge's chamber and hear the judge talk about some of the cases and things like that.
Right.
was like, I don't want to be here. I don't want no parts of that, but that was shown to me at an early age. And I knew I didn't want any parts of that. So I made sure I did whatever it took not to get there.
Right, right, right.
And everybody has a mind
Right.
like that. So we
Yeah.
have to understand, how are they thinking? How do they make decisions? How do they problem solve?
Right.
And so that assessment I'm talking about help us to understand all of that about these youth at the earliest age possible. We just
Right.
have to get them to take it, and we have to get parents to understand this is something that's out here, and it's not a self-assessment. They're not answering questions, so they might look like they're playing a video game,
Right.
but it gives them an opportunity to become engaged. And the whole objective is for them to understand who they are from their core. And then
Good.
we can understand who we are from our core at the earliest age possible.
Right.
Because we have maestros who are in music and they're only 5 years old.
Right. Right.
So it's possible.
At my age right now, I'm just learning how to play the trumpet, Maxine.
I'm not musically inclined at all. So
Neither am I. At my age, I'm just learning how to play the trumpet. The piano soon to follow.
Right.
What you said, you're absolutely correct. I can remember when I was a kid, my dad came home one day, he had a pamphlet, showed me needle marks on a heroin addict. Don't you never be like that. Scared the living daylights out of me, Maxine. And from that moment on, I said, I will never in my life even smoke a cigarette. So when I was young, that put fear in me to stay away from drugs. Parents, they have, this is a great strategy as well, too, in a nugget. Have those kind of conversations with your kids. Do not be afraid to have a certain type of conversation with your kid. The younger you start with your kid, the better. It's going to be a little challenging and a little difficult to have a certain conversation with your kid at the age of 18 when they're almost on their way out, because now they're going to look at you like, we never talked about this before. Why are you talking about? And they're going to feel uncomfortable. You're going to feel uncomfortable. If the conversation is going to be forced, it's not going to be natural because you never did it before as a parent. You never started it. Weave that basket as soon as they're small, okay? And when they get a little bit bigger, it won't seem foreign to them, like, oh, we talk about this all the time. Hey, this is natural. This is a natural conversation. And they will respect you a lot more. Have those type of conversations with your kids, because if you don't teach them when they're young, it's going to be very challenging and very difficult to sit down and discuss certain things about life with your kids at an adult age. They're going to be looking at you like, you got to be kidding me. I'm 21 years old.
Right. Well, I'm gonna be having a couple conversations with some of the police departments about the same thing. And Elizabeth just brought up a good point. She said, I think perhaps creating a community with those who are incarcerated and have been rehabilitated to come into the schools and tell their stories. It's nothing like hearing a fresh story or a story that someone has already experienced. And that's one of the reasons I feel like it helps me when I'm working with the youth, is because I've not been incarcerated or anything like that, but I have gone through a lot of experiences.
Right.
And when they tell me, it's like, I be transparent with them, and the thing about it is that it's confidential. But I tell them all the time, but I must report if there's something by law, I must report. So it's not confidential to the point that whatever you tell me is going to be total secret. But by law, if I'm responsible for reporting it, then I must report it. But I love what Elizabeth is saying, is have those conversations, have those individuals who have those stories, who can tell the stories firsthand, what it's like. And who could probably even say, I didn't listen. My parents tried to tell me. My mentor tried to tell me. The teacher tried to tell me. But I had my own way of doing things because I was indispensable.
Right.
I was going to get caught, and then
Hey, Maxine, you say you didn't listen? You didn't listen?
I listened. They might not have. I was scared as I don't know what. They used to call me scaredy cat. She's a scaredy cat. I'm like, that's okay. I'll be a scaredy cat.
Listen, Elizabeth she's absolutely correct.
Point. Yeah, she's on point.
She's absolutely correct. And that's a conversation as well, too. Piano, then Miss Joy take piano first, the foundation of it. Yeah, I've actually had a piano for probably over 15 years. I bought it for my sons years ago. I think they touched it probably 3 times. It's just a piece of furniture now. So now, I want to learn how to play the trumpet now. So, with the little bit of wind that I do have left, I'm gonna try to put my effort into that. But she's right. She,
It's
but
the
Maxine,
foundation. It's the keys, the strokes, the music, the
right,
tunes. All of that goes hand in hand. So
right, right.
this has been an awesome conversation. So we're
Thank
out of
you.
time. We've already talked an entire hour. But as usual, I'm going to have to bring you back because you're going to have some more
Sure.
facts and some more research that you've done that you can bring
Right.
us up to, up to par of what's
Thank you.
going on yesteryear versus what's going on today.
Right.
And so, Frank, thank you so much for
Thank you,
allowing,
Maxine.
bringing your time and your talent and your
Thank you.
expertise here to
Thank
share
you.
all of this great information.
Thank you.
So, how can people get in touch with you and where do they go to get your book?
They can go on Amazon and they can actually just type out Frank Zaquan Jordan. Or you can just email me and I will email you back. Zaquan 11212 at yahoo.com. And I will email you back. I got 2 dates coming up. I'll be in Alabama April 22nd, and then I'm going to Detroit for 2 days
All right.
there to do lecturing as well too at a bookstore.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, he talks, he lectures, he teaches at universities and colleges. So he's available not only with his book signing, but also to be a keynote speaker and to talk
Yes.
about Black history.
Yes.
So, Frank, our Black history historian, thank you again for this phenomenal conversation.
Thank you, Maxine. Hey, Maxine, thank you. And keep up your greatness as well, too. And congratulations as well, too, on your award, too. I'm very proud of you, and I'm enamored by what you do as well, too, Maxine. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Frank. And we'll make sure we put that email out there as well.
Yes.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. You've heard it from our Black history historian, all of the great information about youth development. There's much work to be done, but you've done a lot of work to begin with. And you have help out here. So reach out to myself, Maxine at lovelessco.com. And hey, go to my website at lovelessco.com. And also be sure to look on Amazon and purchase Frank's books. So in the meantime, in between time, I'll see you next week. Same time, same station. I believe in you and I trust you believe in yourself. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Maxine.
Telling me to dance, taking a chance. Telling me to dance, taking a chance. Telling me to dance, taking a chance.